In today's video, I'm going to show you how to use auto layout in Swift. Let's get started. I created a blank Xcode project here, and I'm going to define a UI view. Let container view equal UI view. Let's go into our view did load and say view.add subview container view. Let's see what happens when we run this. You can see nothing really happened. Let me change the background of this. So nothing really happened. We added our container view, but we don't know where it is. We can't see it. So we created a UI view, but we didn't tell our app where to put it. We just created it and added it to the view, but we never said where it has to go. Before this view.add subview line, we actually have to write this. So container view dot translates auto resizing mask into constraints. It's a really long name, but thankfully we have autocomplete, so I'm going to enter into that. And it's very important that you set this equal to false. Now, let's try running this again. Still nothing. Let's define a width and height. So container view dot width anchor dot constraint, and you can see that we have a bunch of options to choose from. We have equal to constant, equal to with a multiplier parameter. We have greater than or equal to, just equal to, and so on. There's a lot of different options we can choose from, but for this, we're just going to do equal to constant. So we can set it to a specific width. I'm going to set this equal to 100. And it's very important that at the end of this, you write dot isActive equals true. We gave it a width, now we have to give it a height. So we're going to say the same thing, but this time for height. Container view dot height anchor dot constraint equal to constant 100. And activate that also. Let's run this again. Still nothing. Let's give our container view a background color. We're going to make it cyan. And there we go. There's our container view. Let's see what happens if we don't put these lines. Before it was invisible. And just see what happens. Nothing. See? We have to set a width and height. Okay, so we have our cyan square, but it's in the corner of our screen. If we rotate our screen, I'm using Command and then the left or right arrow keys. And that's how I rotate the screen. When I rotate the screen, the cube stays in one place. It stays in the top left corner. But that's not where I want it to be. I want it to be more centered. I want it to be somewhere right here. For that, we say container view dot center, and we have two different center constraint options. We have center X anchor and center Y anchor. If you remember from elementary school, this horizontal axis is the x-axis, and this vertical axis is the y-axis. So left and right is x, up and down is y. I want this box to be centered to the view's center x anchor. So if you don't look at this box right here, I want it to be centered relative to the view's center x. So that would be right here, anywhere along this line, because this is the center line for the x. So I'm going to say constraint equal to, and here we can reference another view. So we can constrain this relative to our overall view, view.centerXanchor. So what we said was we want our container view's x anchor to be centered to the view's x anchor. We're going to activate that also and run this. Now it's exactly where I want it to be. It's centered along the x-axis of our view. Now let's center it in the y. So the y is up and down here, so it's going to be centered right here and in the x, which is going to end up being perfectly centered in the middle of our screen. Just quickly do that. And there we go. Here's our perfectly centered cube. No matter in which position or which size our phone is, it's always going to be centered exactly where we want it to be. Let's take a look at some of the other options. So we centered it to the X anchor, and if we put a comma here, we see that we also have a constant. Let's just experiment with this value. So I'm going to put the constant as 100. Remember, our square was right here, but now it shifted 100 pixels to the right. If we make this negative, it's going to shift 100 pixels to the left. So negative is to the left, positive is to the right. This is all very intuitive if you remember back to middle school math. All of your negative numbers were on the left side, all of your positive numbers were on the right side. Anyway, we could do the same thing for our center Y anchor. And now I brought it down here. A negative brings it up here. Okay, so I don't want it to be over here, and I don't want it to be in the center either. I want it to be centered along the y-axis, but touching the left side. Is that possible? Yes. So if I want it centered along the y-axis, but not the x-axis, I can just comment out the code that constrains it to the x. Or I can delete it altogether. If we run this again, we're going to see it is centered along the y-axis, and it automatically adjusted itself to the left. But we didn't specify it to be to the left. By default, it's going to put it there, but if we want to specify it, which we should, because we want to avoid bugs, we have to say containerview.leftAnchor.constraint equal to view.leftAnchor. And we're going to activate that also. Now it's there because we put it there, not because it wanted to go there. Awesome. Let's play around with this constant. I want it to be touching the left side, but I want it offset by 20 pixels. There we go. And we can do the same thing for the right anchor. It kind of looks weird. It's no longer a perfect square, and it's not offset from the right side. If anything, it's going into the right side, and it's going in by exactly 20 pixels, because that's what we told it to do. We told our app to move this box plus 20 pixels. Again, if you think about it like a number line, with 0 being in the middle, negative numbers over here, positive numbers over here, we told it to touch the right side and move another 20 pixels inwards. If we want to offset it this way, then we have to make this number negative 20. And there we go. Alright, there's a few more options we can look at. We did left, right, center X, center Y, but we didn't do up and down. Up and down works the same exact way. So instead of right anchor, we can say top anchor. And let's see what happens if we leave it center Y. We're going to get a really interesting glitch. It's stretched out to be the whole height of the screen. That's because we told it we want it centered in the Y, but we want the top touching the top. And if it's centered in the Y, then it's going to be symmetrical. So it's stretched out the shape. It ignored our set height. And this is going to happen a lot. If you're not specific with your constraints, or if you over-constrain your shapes or views, you're going to get really interesting and weird glitches. And you can see down here, we actually get an error. Unable to simultaneously satisfy constraints. So we told it, keep a set height of 100. Even though we gave it a set height of 100, it overrode that, because then it would break this constraint here. If it was only from here up, then it would no longer be centered in the Y. So to compensate for that, it grew to the full height of the screen, so this way it could still remain centered in the Y-axis, and the top of this container view can touch the top of the view. So your constraints will sometimes break, and that's something to keep in mind. Alright, so let's undo this over here. So let's no longer center it in the Y-axis. Let's constrain it to the top, and let's also constrain it to the right. So container view.right anchor.constraint to view.right anchor. Now it should be in the top right. Let's get rid of this minus 20. There's one more thing I want to show you guys. So it is centered on the top, but it kind of goes a little bit into the screen. If our screen didn't have any of these rounded corners, then this would work exactly how we expected it to. The top would be at the very top and the left would be at the very left. And we would see the corner of the square touch the corner of the screen. But because it's rounded, we can't really see that. But what if we could get our constraints to only work where there are no rounded corners? we want the top of the screen to be right here. We can do that too. Over here where we said view.topAnchor, in between view and top anchor, we can put safe area layout guide. So it comes out to view.safearealayoutguide.topAnchor. Let's run this now. And now you can see our new top anchor starts right here, underneath this dynamic island and where there are no rounded corners. Now we can see the corner of our little square, which is exactly what we want. We also have the same property for the left and right anchor, but we're not really going to see a difference here. If we rotate our screen, you can see that the top is on the top and the right is in the safe area layout guide. Perfect. The same is true for the bottom. So if you were to constrain it on the bottom instead of the top, it's not down here, it's right here, wherever the corner radius of the screen ends. Okay, so what did we go over so far? We went over setting a width and height, centering it in the X, in the Y, constraining it to the top, left, bottom, and right. We went over safe area layout guide, and that's pretty much it for the basics of auto layout. Let's go back here to our width and height anchors. I want to show you a few more ways you can mess around with that. So instead of equal to constant like we did here, let's do equal to multiplier. For the equal to part, let's make it equal to the view's width anchor. And for the multiplier, you can do whatever you want. It is on a scale from 0 to 1. But if you want to make it twice the length or twice the width of the screen, which you can do, then you would do 2, 3, 4, so on. But it is on a scale of 0 to 100. In decimal form, that's 0 to 1. Let's see what happens when we make it 100% of the screen's width. Exactly as we expect. And now, instead of 1, let's do times 0.8. And now it's 80% of the screen's width. We can't really definitively see that because it looks like it could be overflowing the edge here. So let's just bring it back to the center. Yes, so now it's 80% of the screen's width, and I put it in the center of the view. You could keep messing around with this value here, make it 40% of the screen's width, and it's this tiny thing. And when we rotate our screen, the width has changed now, and auto layout will adjust to keep following our rules. So now this is the screen's width, and this is the screen's height. It's still going to be 100 pixels tall, but it's always going to take up 40% of the screen, like we defined here. This is the benefit of using auto layout. There's two more things I want to show you. Again, let's see what happens when we set this equal to true, or we just forget to put it all together. Nothing happens. Our little box doesn't render anymore. So that's why it's always important to set this equal to false. Don't set it equal to true, or forget to put it all together, because nothing will show up on your screen. And you might get a little bit annoyed typing out .isActive equal true every single time, so I want to show you another workaround. I'm just going to delete all these .isActive. Now we get all these little warnings. It says that the result of call to constraint is unused. So in other words, we didn't activate it. We know we can activate it with this .isActive, but another way you can activate it is by typing nslayoutconstraint.activate. We're going to tab into this first one, and you can see that it expects an array of constraints. So we're going to put square brackets, enter into that a few times, and we're going to move all of our constraints into this. And we won't be able to run it because we have to put commas after each constraint. And there we go. We didn't have to worry about the .isActive. We just have to write this once, and all of the constraints are activated. Out of habit, I just prefer to use .isActive equal true when I'm constraining like this, but that's very rare. I don't constrain like this or like this anymore. I actually wrote my own custom auto layout functions, and we'll go over that in a different video. Now, there's just a few more things I want to show you. The first being good code practice. We don't want to have all of our constraints and setup in the view did load like this. Instead, we're going to take all of this here, Command X or cut it, and we're going to create a new function outside of our view.didLoad. I'm going to call it func setUpContainerView, and I'm going to paste everything to there. Now in our view.didLoad, instead of having all of this code in here, I'm just going to have one line, setUpContainerView, and everything works exactly the same. That was the first thing I want to show you. Good coding practice. Set everything up inside a function and then call that function view.didLoad, so you keep view.didLoad nice and clean. Okay, one more thing I want to show you. This doesn't pertain to auto layout, it actually pertains to something else. It's creating what I call contained UI elements. So over here we set up container view and we put the translates auto resizing mask into constraints in our setup function, and we put the color in the setup function. Instead of doing it like that, I want everything contained up here. How do we do that? We can't do container view dot background color equals dot cyan. We'll get an error because it's outside the scope of a function. So instead what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite this declaration. I'm going to say let container view, I'm going to put a colon, make it of type UI view, put equals, open curly brace, enter, it'll close the curly brace, and outside of this curly brace I'm going to put a set of parentheses. Now inside here is where we can do all of the setup that we need. So I'm going to say let view equal UI view, and then it always expects a return. So whatever you're setting up, in this case a UI view, you have to return that. And I call this UI view internally. And it's going to give us an error because we declared it twice. I'll comment that out. And now inside here, we're going to say view.translates auto resizing mask into constraints equal to false. So we put that down here. And then we can set the background color inside this little contained code. Cut and paste it into here, but we can't say container view. Because we declared it inside as view, we have to use view here. Let's run this again, and everything should be the same. Yep. So we're not doing the setup for this container view over here in this function. Whatever we can set up in this little code snippet, we'll do that. We can also change the corner radius inside here, rerun the project, and awesome. And there's one more thing I want to show you, and that's that you can put views inside of views. So I'm just going to quickly create a label. I'm not going to set it up like this over here. I'm just going to set it up like this. And in our setup container view function, I'm going to say, instead of view.addSubview, I'm going to say container view.addSubview. So the view added this container view, and the container view is going to add this label. Just going to constrain it quickly. Let's give the label a text, and label.translates auto resizing mask into constraints equals false. Awesome. It's centered perfectly within the container, and the container is centered perfectly within the view. Now you might be asking, why didn't I set the label's center X anchor to the view's center X anchor? Well, we can do that, and we could do the same for the Y. And it looks like nothing changed, but I want to show you something. We're going to keep it like this, and I'm going to move the container view 100 pixels away from the center of the view's center Y angle. Hopefully that made sense. I'm going to move it by 100 pixels. And you can see that our hello text stayed in the center of the screen, or in the center of the view. We want it to be centered relative to the container view. So we're going to change this back. And now, wherever our container view moves, our label will move also, because it's centered relative to the container. Hopefully that made sense. Alright, what did we learn today? We went through a lot. we did a basic introduction to auto layout constraints. We did width, height, top, bottom, left, and right. We learned a quick tip on keeping our view did load clean by doing all of this setup in a separate function. We put all of the setup for our views inside this little code snippet here, and we can do the same for label here. Run this, and nothing should have changed. Yeah. Alright, this video is getting pretty long. I hope you guys learned something. Feel free to refer back to this video whenever you need to. There's a lot of really cool projects in the works, so I hope you stick around for those. I just want to have a couple of these introductory videos out so I have something to refer people to if they get stuck on a certain point in the future projects. Anyway, I hope you guys learned something. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out a lot.